All right, second hour, Josh Tully Show, GCN Radio Network. You already know the website. You already know what to do once you're there. You already know how to follow us on social media. So we'll get rid of the typical second hour introduction to get back to our very special guest, Dr. Hugh Ross. We're talking about science, logic, reason, and where does that lead us to believe? And we're going to get back to him in a second, but I just kind of want to lay the framework from a layman's perspective. Let's say we have scientist A and scientist B. Scientist B believes that something created everything. Scientist A is ripping his hair out saying, no, 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 I don't want that to be so. Both of these scientists have lack of evidence. I mean, let's just be honest. Both of them lack evidence. However, scientist A says, I lack evidence, so scientifically you have to believe me. And we see that all the time. You know, where is the transition in life in the fossil record? Well, it's not there. We have zero evidence in the evidence. Now, this is actually evidence we have. We have the fossil record. He's saying, yep, yeah, there's actually no evidence in the evidence that we did actually collect, but you believe me anyway. Now, the other scientist, scientist B, the scientist that says, yes, something created this, has the evidence, has the scientific testable research to prove it. Yes, there are some points that are still missing that we just don't know yet. And you say, well, I'm going to believe scientist A because I'm a scientific-minded person. Let's just be honest. Just be honest. Search your heart. What sort of person are you? If the scientist that says, hey, there's no evidence, so believe in my evidence, is telling you that scientist B doesn't have evidence, if we wrote that out as an equation, it wouldn't make sense. And you know that. I know you know that. That's why this conversation is so important, because there is no reason after today that you can say to yourself, because of science, I don't believe in a God. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to believe in a God. That doesn't mean that we somehow called God into the show and he's in the studio with us. None of that. But what it does is 100% certainty takes away the excuse of, scientifically speaking, this is why there is no God. So anyway, with that in mind, let's get back to Dr. Ross, because when we look at the evidence, and we look at it like a scale. Everybody knows the justice scale, right? And we look at what side is getting more and more stuff on their side of the scale. That would, for the layman, say, okay, well then, as a grown adult, I'm going to lean this way. And if it was just one or two pieces on one side more than the other, then I could say, oh, well, you know, let's kind of be wishy-washy and wait until more evidence comes in. But, Doctor, that's not the case, is it?
It's not the case at all. And hey, I just got cut off, so can you give me a brief idea of what you were just talking about?
Well, yeah, I was talking about how, from a layman's perspective, in the introduction to the second hour, from a layman's perspective, what it really comes down to is we're either going to believe scientist A, that admits that there's no evidence for his evolutionary theory, the random chance theory. There's missing gaps. Yes, there's missing gaps, but believe me anyway. And then there's scientist B, who is a creationist, something created everything. And yes, there's some missing gaps there too, but scientist A, who says, believe me even though I have missing gaps, will tell the layman, don't believe in scientist B even though he has fewer missing gaps. And from a logical perspective, that's just stupid. So then that's where we kind of came into this scale system of, it's kind of tilting creation's way, isn't it?
Well, there always will be gaps. And when we talk about the God of the gaps, there's also the nature of the gaps. Whatever model or explanation we come up with, there's things that we've yet to discover. How you test your worldview belief is what happens to your gaps. Are your gaps getting bigger, or are they getting smaller? Are they getting more numerous or less numerous? And that's how we operate in science. We have all these different competing models, but we know we're on the right track when the gaps in our model's explanation are getting smaller and smaller, and the number of gaps are getting less and less. Then we know we're on the right track. We also know we're on the right track when we resolve an anomaly in our model. Now, all models have anomalies, things that don't quite fit. But when you resolve an anomaly, does it reveal other anomalies that are a much lower level of significance, or does it reveal anomalies that are a much larger degree of significance? That's how we test things in science. And so we're looking for which model offers the most comprehensive and detailed explanation of what we know to be true, and which model is most successful in predicting future scientific discoveries. I mean, that's the whole basis of reasons to believe. We founded our Christian creation belief system, and we call a testable model. Because that's the most common objection I hear from scientists about Christianity, is that it's not testable, it's not falsifiable, it doesn't make predictions. So 28 years ago, we founded Reasons to Believe. We founded it on the foundation of a testable, predictive creation model. And our appeal is, if our predictions are coming true and your predictions are failing to come true, then perhaps you need to take seriously the claims that you see in the Bible on your life. And the good news is we can continue to make that test on a daily basis. I mean, one thing you'll see in our Reasons.org website is reasons.org/fine-tuning. Up will pop a compendium, and it shows you how the evidence for the supernatural design of our galaxy and solar system has accumulated as astronomers and physicists learn more and more about our galaxy and solar system. And the evidence has been getting for the past 25 years an average of a factor of 1 million stronger every single month, which is why I can say to atheists when I speak on university campuses, if you're not convinced today, wait 1 month and see what happens to the accumulating evidence.
I mean, think about that, folks. Just for a second. The evidence is growing so rapidly that it grows by a factor of 1 million every month. And you're still sitting there, well, I believe in, science. No, you don't. Let's just be honest. You have an emotional attachment to want to believe in what you call science. The real science is leaning the other direction. And, I watched you do a lecture, Doctor, and you had this chart up that said, when we started, there was like 86 whatever that you were using to say, okay, this is why we believe. And then 2 years later, it was 120. Do you understand what I'm referring to?
Yeah, you'll see that at reasons.org/fine-tuning. We kind of show you where things were back in 1995 and where they were in 2000 and 2004 and 2006. You get to watch how the evidence grows. And if you look at the probability in the last column, it's literally growing an average of about a factor of 1 million every single month. And it continues. I mean, you go, again, all of the scientists here at Reasons to Believe, we have Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts. And on our Twitter accounts, we actually try our best to keep you up to date with the stuff that's being published literally on a daily basis, that's providing us with more evidence that the Bible is the inspired, inerrant Word of God, and that there's a God out there that created everything and has a great plan for your life.
And just for clarification for the listeners who go to reasons.org, we're not talking about just science that you guys are coming up. I mean, we're talking about scientific discoveries that universities across the world are discovering, right? And we're talking about real, verifiable, peer-reviewed science.
Well, that's what we do at Reasons to Believe. We survey the peer-reviewed scientific literature and put our belief system to the test. And, we have a feature on our website called Today's New Reason to Believe. These are articles that we publish that are designed for lay people to keep up to date on some of the more significant scientific discoveries that keep you, that are providing more evidence for Christian faith.
So let's get into some of the really mind-blowing stuff. We're up against the break, and that was wonderful. I think it laid the groundwork great for what we're about to talk to. What are the odds on some of these discoveries? And when you talk about Vegas odds on a football game, they have a 40% chance. This will blow your mind. You're going to need a bigger calculator. We'll be back right after this. Right, before you start sending me emails, and we're probably going to clip this interview up and put it up on YouTube too, so Doctor, if you could have your staff keep that button up with that offer for a while, that'd be awesome. But before you either send me an email or post a response to a YouTube video that says, Josh, what about this? And you spout something scientific that you're going to use as evidence, do me a favor. One, understand that I'm not the scientist. If you really have that scientific proof and you are a secret PhD that I don't know about, then go to reasons.org and tell them. and let them respond. Or the next time the doctor's on, call in and we'll let him respond. To take it to me and say, ha ha ha, see, we got you because of the nanoparticle, blah, blah, blah. I don't know this. So do the responsible thing. And again, before you start posting something that you read from some other scientist, do me a favor. Go to reasons.org, buy at least 5 books, make sure one of them is The Origin of Life, read those books, and then if you still hold that view, then you can call in and challenge the doctor next time. And because last time he was in, we got these emails from people who really expected me to do some sort of experiment in the back of the studio, which proves the molecule. It was, come on, get real. But here's what it comes down to, the odds. How much are you willing to bet that there is no God? And doctor, when I watched you do one of these lectures that you do, and you're really good at them, by the way, you presented some odds. Well, what are the odds that this would happen? And you were using some, I'm not sure if it was dark energy or the size of the universe or whatever. But the number was so massive. I tried to put it on my calculator on my phone. It just wouldn't fit. And if you understand what I'm referring to, can you kind of give us some odds that were wrong?
Well, we live in an expanding universe, a universe that expands from a space-time beginning. And if you expand the universe too quickly, then the gas in the universe cannot be collected by gravity to make galaxies, stars, and planets. And if the universe is nothing but dispersed gas, there's no possibility for life. But if you expand the universe too slowly, then gravity will collect all that gas and compress it into nothing but black holes and neutron stars, where the density is so extreme that molecules are impossible, atoms are impossible, even protons and electrons are impossible. Well, and of course life would be impossible. Well, numerous physicists and astronomers have calculated the degree to which you have to fine-tune dark energy in order to get a universe where you get the stars and planets of the right type showing up at the right time in the history of the universe so that life is possible. And the answer is you have to fine-tune it to within 1 part in 10 to the 122nd place. So that's 122 zeros after the 1. And yeah, it's a mind-boggling large number. I mean, to give you some point of comparison, there's only 10 to the 79 protons and neutrons in the entire observable universe. So this is a number way bigger than that. But what I've done for lay audiences is to compare that fine-tuning design and dark energy that makes life physically possible with the very best example of human engineering, creativity, and design. And as far as I can tell, that would probably be the LIGO instrument. It's a gravity wave telescope, the most precise instrument that human beings have ever invented and actually built. But if you compare the fine-tuning design of that very best human example to what we see just in the dark energy term of the universe, it ranks 10 to the 97 times inferior, which means that the one that designed this dark energy to make possible the existence of physical life at a minimum is 10 to the 97 times, or 10 trillion, 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 trillion times more intelligent and more knowledgeable than the Caltech and MIT physicists that invented and designed this amazing machine, and at least that many times better funded than the U.S. government that actually gave us the funds to actually build this amazing instrument. And I use this as an argument to show that this entity beyond space and time that my peers already concede must exist to explain why the universe exists, that entity must be a personal being, because only a personal being can manifest the attributes of intellect, knowledge, creativity, and power.
You know, that is so mind-blowing that even, I mean, let's just kind of take a step back. When we're talking about that fine-tuning, and we know it has to be tuned, because even let's just get rid of tuning and saying the odds. The odds of this being so perfect that it would actually work was to the trillions of trillions of trillions. If this was any area of life other than a supernatural deity, everybody would agree that we would have to be absolutely stupid to go against the conclusion. I mean, if we were going to say, well, there's a 1 in 20 trillion, quadrillion, gazillion, bazillion chance that your car's going to randomly turn into a duck, we would all say you're an idiot. But for some reason, when scientists say, well, I'm going to go on that 1 in quadrillion chance that this was all random. If this was any other topic, we would think, who let this person tie their own shoes in the morning? But somehow we want to hold on to that 1 in a bazillion that the evolutionary scientist is right.
Well, I only gave you one physical parameter. The truth is there's 180 different features of the laws of physics in the universe that likewise must be extraordinarily fine-tuned to make possible the existence of life. And I think what's even more compelling is the fine-tuning dramatically increases if you're talking the possibility of human life and human civilization. I mean, Freeman Dyson, a physicist, said on television and wrote in one of his books that when I look at the universe, I can't avoid the conclusion that somehow the universe knew we human beings were coming. It was literally designed in advance for the entry of human beings. And the entry of human beings also is fine-tuned. There's only a very narrow time window in the history of the universe when human civilization is possible, and there's just one locale within the universe where it's all possible. This entire universe exists to make possible the existence of human beings. I mean, the universe literally has to be as big as it is and as old as it is to make the existence of human beings on this one planet we call planet Earth. And if people want to see the documentation, I wrote a book called Why the Universe is the Way It Is, where all this is laid out, and people can check the scientific articles on which it is based.
Yeah, that's a good book, by the way. I have that book. It's great. And, and that's what it really comes down to. And the reason we had you on, because obviously, like I said, we're not going to have some sort of scientific discovery made on talk radio, but the purpose was to really lay out this framework so people no longer hold on to this crutch. And what's so ironic, or sad, really, is that people who say, oh, you're one of those believers, religion is just a crutch, the opposite is actually true. When it comes from a scientific perspective, the opposite is true. You're relying on gaps that are so massive I could drive a truck through them in your evolutionary theory, your random chance theory, that you're the one relying on the crutch. My side is accurate to the 1 to the bazillion, gazillion, whatever that number was. That's just absolutely mind-boggling. So let's get to some of the larger questions. Why is it big? Why are we here? Where'd the moon come from? In the last 2 segments. Don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be back right after this. We're talking to Dr. Hugh Ross, the website reasons.org. There's a promotion up there. There's a button, and you give of any gift. You put in my last name or however that works, and I'm sure we'll recap that before the end of the show. But there's resources for you, is what it comes down to. If you really want to dig, if you really want to be scientific, then there's your solution. Doctor, we have a caller. His name's Jonathan, and he has a question for you. So before I get to my question about the moon, let's get to Jonathan. Welcome to the show, sir. You have a question for the guest?
Well, I actually just kind of tuned in, and I'm not sure that my question will necessarily be for the guest, but I was curious to know if either one of you have heard of Drunvalo Melchizedek and the books that he has written, which is the Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, Volume 1 and 2, and the workshops that he gives on breathing.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with his book.
I'm not familiar with the book either.
So, but you're welcome to pose that question at reasons.org or on my Facebook page, and I'll do some research and give you an answer.
Oh, thank you so much, Jonathan. All right, so, Doctor, my question, and what I find really interesting is, and we covered this last time you were on the show, the Bible talks about how The Earth is a sphere suspended in space. It talks about an expanding universe, all things that you would think, wait a second, how does a book a few thousand years old know these things? We haven't discovered them until relatively recently. And one of the really cool ones is how we got the moon and how the atmosphere kind of cleared up. Those two I find absolutely fascinating. Can you kind of dig into that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, you see in Genesis that the Earth started off with an atmosphere that wouldn't let light through, and that's what we would expect for a planet as big as the Earth and as far away from the sun as it is. It would have started off with an atmosphere at least 100 times thicker than it is today. And, you know, what we see in Creation Day 2, that there's a water cycle that shows up. We now know that the moon-forming event is responsible for both. And, you know, what happened was there was a planet more than twice the mass of Mars that was sharing the orbit of the Earth and very slowly creeped towards Earth and collided with the Earth when the Earth had an extremely deep ocean. And that collision caused the Earth to lose all of its water and all of its atmosphere, and a much thinner layer of water and a much thinner atmosphere replaced it, giving us a large rocky planet with a thin layer of water and a thin atmosphere, which is exactly what you need to be able to sustain advanced life. Now, a number of physicists have been working on the moon-forming event, and they've been publishing papers over the past 15 years, but every time they make the model better, they wind up with more design in the model. And so there's an issue of Nature that came out a few months ago where the moon-forming event is on the cover. And there was like 5 articles inside that British journal. And basically they were saying we have to redo the models because we're finding far too much design in these moon-forming calculations we're doing. So they redid the models using better data and wound up coming up with new models that actually showed far greater design than the former models. And I like what one of the researchers said in his review of these new models. He says this new understanding of the moon-forming event is causing, quote, philosophical disquiet amongst our midst. In other words, they're finding so much design in the moon to make possible the existence of life here on planet Earth that is pointing to a supernatural answer as to why we have a planet and we have this Earth-Moon system, which is so optimally designed for advanced life. I mean, if you look at our moon, compared to the mass of its host planet, it's 50 times more massive than any other known moon. But that's exactly what you need to stabilize the tilt of the rotation axis. And you need a stable rotation axis tilt for advanced civilization to be possible. In fact, there's 20 different features of the moon that must be fine-tuned, designed to make possible the existence of advanced life here on planet Earth. So when our family celebrates Thanksgiving, we thank God for the moon.
And you know what I find so interesting is, like you referenced, these scientists, these other scientists, they have to somehow get rid of design. Why? I mean, you're in this community. You debate other scientists. Why do they want to get rid of it so bad when there's so much evidence, even in their own words, for it?
Well, if there really is a God that's responsible for this, and this God is a personal being, and he's invested as much as what we see the scientific evidence, him investing to make possible the existence of humans and human civilization, then the next logical step is this God is watching my life and evaluating my life. And if my behavior doesn't square with that, then I'm going to be very motivated to resist that conclusion. And that's what I've noticed, is that the closer you get to establishing scientific evidence for the personality of the Creator and his intimate involvement with us in the case of our personal lives, then the more people push back and resist and say, I'm not sure I want that. I mean, I think they're okay with the idea that there's a God that creates the universe, but a God that creates me, a God that's actually watching what I'm doing, a God that cares for me, now I'm suddenly responsible to this being. And it's that responsibility that causes me to say, I'm not sure I want this because I want to live my life a particular way. I mean, the Bible tells us that we're all born in rebellion against the authority of the Creator. And it takes a humility before a creator for us to actually accept the fact that he is there, he cares for us, and he wants to help us with our inability to live a morally perfect life. I mean, what I love about the Christian message, it's the creator of the universe personally coming to planet Earth, showing us an example of moral perfection, but actually making an offer to every human being to trade our moral imperfection for his moral perfection. But it requires making the creator of the universe the master of your life. And that's where a lot of people resist.
Oh, totally. I mean, they go kicking and screaming. And if you think about just the past 4 to 5 years, some of the theories that have come up to explain this away, you know, you have like Neil deGrasse Tyson who's saying everything's a hologram because everything's so perfect, but I'm not going to admit somebody designed the hologram. You have that other guy with the really funky hair that is saying that everything is a computer program, but heaven forbid something programmed it. You have Mikio Kaku saying, well, you know, everything actually doesn't exist. So it's perfect because it's not actually here, and because it's not actually here, then it can appear perfect. It's like, again, if this was any other area of life, you'd just be like, come on.
Well, it's what you see in the book of Romans written by the Apostle Paul, is that we see all this evidence in creation that there must be a creator, but instead of giving credit to the creator, we say, isn't it wonderful what Mother Nature did? So we're giving the credit to the creation and not to the creator. I mean, I see that with my physicist friends. They try to apply attributes to the universe that don't belong to the universe, but only belong to the one that created the universe. But that, again, is something that human beings have been doing for tens of thousands of years. But the good news is that if we humbly look at the evidence in creation and say, there must be a God that makes all this possible, then there's a pathway. As it says in the book of Hebrews, anyone who comes to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. It's a good God. It's not a God that wants bad things for you. It's a God that wants good things for you. And he wants a relationship with each one of us. And that offer is out there for every human being.
All right, so I'm going to try to get 2 big questions in before the end, and these are questions that came up after you were on the last time, and we have a segment and a half to do it. The first one is, what about that alien theory? Because a lot of people, a lot of what we would consider credible people, are now starting to say that. They're saying, hey, something else brought life to us, and you know, maybe it's an alien and we're genetically designed, because look at that chromosome that is somehow melded, so yep, an alien did it. And the other question on the other side of the break is, well, okay, I've been listening so far, I believe that something made it, so maybe I'm agnostic, but why the God of the Bible? Why not Buddha? Why not some Hindu god? We'll get those 2 answers right after this break. We're talking to Dr. Hugh Ross. Last segment of the show, it went by so quickly. Doctor, you know the 2 questions we need answers to. We have time to get to them. But before we do, can you tell about that promotion one more time for Josh Tully listeners?
Yeah, they can go to our reasons.org website, and they'll see a little button on our homepage that says The Josh Tully Show. If they click on that, they'll get a free recording of my story of how astrophysics brought me to faith in Christ. You'll also see in the homepage our new book, Origins of Life. And if they click on that for a gift of any amount, we'll ship them free that book. So those are both up there at www.reasons.org.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you for that. All right, so the 2 questions. Did aliens do it, and why the God of the Bible?
Well, aliens couldn't have done it because we already know that they would have to travel across a large segment of interstellar space. We've already looked. We already know that there are no intelligent civilizations out past 150 light years. In fact, we know there's no star within thousands of light years that could possibly be a candidate to have a planet orbiting it on which advanced life is possible. And we got another book called Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men, where we point out that it's physically impossible for a physical craft to travel across that large stretch of interstellar space and bring life here to planet Earth. And keep in mind, the origin of life was 3.8 billion years ago. That's so far back in the history of the universe that intelligent life is impossible at that time. It literally takes 13.8 billion years for the universe to be prepared for the entry of advanced life. So there's no way some physical being on another planet could have brought life here to planet Earth. It literally must come from an entity, a being beyond matter, energy, space, and time that created life here on planet Earth 3.83 billion years ago.
That makes sense. Plus, of course, you have the other factors that would make their planet the same as ours. I mean, that statistical odds would have to be duplicated at least twice.
Yeah, I mean, how do you explain where the aliens came from? I mean, you got the same problem.
Exactly. Okay, so why the God of the Bible? Why not some Hindu god or the Native American god? And no disrespect to these other religions. It's an honest question, because a lot of people say, okay, well, all right, I'm a theist or I'm at least an agnostic. I admit that I don't know and maybe something did it. But you guys saying it was the God of the Bible, that's where I draw the line.
Well, the God of the Bible is a triune being, and notice that all the non-Christian faiths deny the doctrine of the Trinity, this idea that God is three persons and one essence. But if God is one and only one, then how do you explain the origin of love? Because, if you got God all alone, love by definition requires another person to receive that love and for you to bestow that love. So the problem with religions that are monotheistic, strict monotheistic, where there's one and only one, is, how do you explain the origin of love? But the problem with these polytheistic religions is you've got all these different gods with different creation plans. And so, for example, in Hinduism, there's this belief that the created realm is filled with contradictions and things that don't fit. But as we look at the created realm, we see perfect harmony and consistency throughout all the scientific disciplines, which tells us there's just one creation plan. And that's what the Trinity's got going for it. You got three persons and a loving relationship with one another before they create anything. But because it's just one essence, one mind, one purpose, we have a consistent creation plan. So really, the only way you can make sense of the created realm is with the God that we see in the Bible, a God that's three persons and one essence. The other thing the Bible's got going for it is its descriptions of what God does matches perfectly what we see in the record of nature. That's not true of Hinduism or Buddhism or Islam or any other non-biblical religion. They make statements about the record of nature that we can prove are incorrect.
Well, exactly, and that's huge. I mean, that was kind of the premise of the last time you were on the show, how many references, scientific references there are in the Bible. And, of course, it's not a science book, but it describes it well enough to say, hey, wait a second, there is science here. The expansion of the universe, light, for goodness sakes. I watched one lecture from a physicist at MIT that said everything had to begin with light. Light created matter. But even if that was true, well, it started with let there be light. So it just matches so well.
Yes, the order of events in Genesis 1 match the chronology of what we see in the record of nature. That was a big factor in my signing my name in the back of a Gideon Bible, giving my life to Jesus Christ, is recognizing that in hundreds of places the Bible had accurately predicted future scientific discoveries. And there's no way that would be possible unless the human authors of the Bible were inspired by the one that actually created everything.
So to kind of sum this up, the layman, obviously there's going to be some scientists that probably hear this interview, but the majority of the people are going to be laymen. At this point, isn't it really an emotional decision that we're making to believe that science does not support a God?
Well, it tells us in Psalm 2 that we're to come to God with our mind to be instructed. And once we realize that what we see is true, then we're to submit our will to the Creator and then enter into an emotional relationship with Him. And what I like about this scientific evidence, it shows us that the God of the Bible must really exist. But then there's the heart issues, the real reasons why people are resisting giving their life to Jesus Christ. It's mind, will, and emotions that all must be in place.
Well, exactly, because like we said in the first hour, the other side of this scientific argument is trying so hard to make their puzzle pieces fit. And as science continues to prove and discover and, come up with testable results here, they're just losing ground. They are becoming the exact thing that they blamed our side of the equation for being for decades, yet they failed to realize it, and I think it's out of pride.
Well, I've found that if I can remove people's intellectual reasons for denying the God of the Bible, then they begin to open up about their personal reasons. Maybe they've had a problem with their relationship with their father, or maybe they met a Christian that offended them very deeply. I mean, it tells us in the Bible that in order for God to forgive us, we must be willing to forgive others. But I've observed that people are not willing to take that step until you first remove their intellectual objections. So that's the pathway to really opening up the heart.
Well, exactly, and that guilt plays such a big part of it, too, because after the last time you were on, I was talking to some people, and it was one-on-one, and what it really came down to was they felt so guilty about the person that they were, what they've done in the past. Maybe they had an abortion or 3 divorces or whatever, just the guilt that they didn't want to believe. And that's what they said. They said, Josh, okay, I get it. I'm not a scientist. He makes some great scientific points. I just don't want to believe. And it's because they have so much guilt and they don't realize that they can get rid of that.
Right. That giving your life to Jesus Christ is when he forgets all the things you've ever done. He forgives you for all of your offenses against him and other people, past, present, and future. The slate is wiped completely clean. I mean, what better offer could you get than that?
And he removes them as far as the East is from the West. And if you want to talk about a statistical just mind blower, the East and the West, unlike the North and the South, they loop back on each other. The East and the West go away from each other infinitely. So, yeah, just absolutely amazing. Thank you, Doctor, so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure when you're on the show, and I know I know what's coming. I understand. We're going to get Josh. You're talking about religion on secular radio, or Josh, you're having this conversation about science, and I know blah blah blah. Listen, this is what it boils down to. I don't like people believing illogical things. The motto of this show, logic, reason, strategy. I'm not a PhD in astronomy. I'm not a PhD in physics, but I do understand logic. And when the Bible says, come, let us reason together, it makes sense to me. Leave the emotions at the door. Look at the evidence. Look at where it guides you. And like on that scale, if there's a bajillion, gazillion pieces of evidence on one side, and your side is still saying, well, there's no proof, and I admit there's no proof, but just believe me anyway. Who's really taking the crazy leap of faith here? It's not the people who are saying that there's a creator. So anyway, that does it for today's show. Fear not, we'll do it all again tomorrow. You can do me a favor, though. Look into jury nullification. Google it. It's really important. No victim, no crime. Today, tomorrow, as always, my friends, may your path lead to heaven, and may freedom follow in your footsteps.